Hello and welcome to News Review. This week we heard it's not a useless public affairs exercise, it's a real thing. Those were the words of the press officer accompanying the team of European Union experts that examined the situation at the Gibraltar-La Linea border. Miguel Patterson said he was sure something useful would come out of the visit and that things would improve for both sides. For his part, the Chief Minister, Fabian Picardo, said that from the government's point of view, this was an access all areas visit, with the local authorities cooperating fully with the investigation.
3 departments of the European Commission were represented in the EU mission: Justice and Home Affairs, Customs and the Anti-Fraud Unit. The inspectors crossed the frontier at 8:30 and, accompanied by the head of the government's legal team, Michael Jamas, walked the short distance to the air terminal, where the Chief Minister had gathered a team of around 30 officials to outline the situation from a Gibraltar perspective. While the visitors were being briefed, so too were the media by the delegation's press secretary.
The remit is twofold. First, there's the customs control and border control aspect. So the experts are it's a fact-finding mission, so they're going to just see how the border controls work, their efficiency, methods, etc. from both sides. That's the first part. And the second part is all the issue related to potential smuggling issues. So in the experts' remit, the environmental issues are not included. That is something that is being carried out in parallel from Brussels. The European Commission has received complaints, information from both sides, and it's studying that aspect, but it is not specifically part of this mission.
I noticed that there is a representative of OLAF among the team. Does this mean that allegations of fraud will be part of the remit?
Well, the whole issue of potential smuggling is part of the remit. So, you know, the experts here have no preconceived ideas whatsoever. It is really a fact-finding mission. It's good to be on the ground, speak with those involved and gather intelligence from both sides, and then in an objective and independent manner to establish conclusions and then move forward. So I mean, everything, the experts have total freedom to really put their ideas on paper, and we'll see eventually what comes out of it.
Well, many people in Gibraltar, as you know, have been skeptical about this visit because the Spanish government was going to be informed of when it was going to take place, and everybody thought there wouldn't be any queues on that day. Sure enough, there aren't any. So from that point of view, has it been worth making this trip?
Yes, it is, because whether there are queues or not, that really doesn't matter. I mean, the most important thing is that the experts speak to the people on the ground, get a feel of the actual physical place, and they have their own techniques to evaluate border control techniques. They've been in other border control places around the EU, difficult situations as well. So it's really useful, and I must reiterate, you know, that European Commission acts in an independent way. It's been asked by both sides to be an objective broker, and that's what it's going to do.
One of the things that I've noticed from the press release that was issued by the European Commission yesterday is that there is no real timescale in which to report back, and in fact no commitment either way on whether further action may be taken or not. Here in Gibraltar, a lot of people's fear is that you'll come, you'll see what's going on, you'll go away, and then that'll be an end of it. We'll hear no more.
Well, indeed, there's no specific legal deadline. The experts will take all the time they need. It might be a long time, it might not be a long time. It really depends on what they find out, and additional information that probably will be requested later on. So in that sense, it is true we don't really know how long it will take. But on the other hand, you know, something useful will come out of this, and I'm pretty sure things will be improved for both sides. So I think the public need not worry. It's not a useless public affairs exercise. It's a real thing that hopefully will improve people's lives.
The plan was for the briefing to last around an hour, but it actually took 2 hours and 3/4. From the airport, the EU experts went to the frontier area to speak to police and customs officers and to see for themselves the arrangements in place at the frontier on the Gibraltar side. While they were doing that, Fabian Picardo spoke to waiting reporters.
The visit today of the inspectors from the EU Commission, the EU Commission mission that have come to Gibraltar, it's been our pleasure to receive them here. Gibraltar will make available to them all facilities necessary for them to carry out their inspections and provide all data that they require. We see this as an access all areas visit. Gibraltar has absolutely nothing to hide. They are welcome to see in Gibraltar any aspect of the operation of the frontier, and anybody from the European Commission in any particular DG we would be very happy to receive in Gibraltar to give all the information that may be necessary. Gibraltarians have always had a great faith that Europe might provide some solutions to the issues that have long affected the relationship with Spain, and in particular the issue of frontier queues. Remember that this queue has not lasted 5 weeks. This queue has lasted 30 years. It's just come on and off at different times. And what I've asked for is an objective criteria for the purposes of the operation of this frontier, so that this isn't just a question of the Spanish foreign minister wakes up in a bad mood, there's an 8-hour queue, he wakes up in a good mood and there's a free flow across the frontier. There has to be an objective criteria which implements the freedoms of movement set out in the Treaty of Rome and in the other treaties establishing the European Union, and the freedom of movement of goods, because although Gibraltar is not part of the common customs union, there is still freedom of movement of goods subject to checks, etc. And what we're looking for is for the EU to investigate what has been going on, not what is going on today, because as people might have expected, there is no queue today, but to look at what has been going on. And there is obviously a video bank of evidence of what has been happening, of how abusive the queues have got. There are of course going to be issues of volume of traffic and some queues as a result of that, but abusive queues, which are queues set up only for political purposes, when cars are set aside and they're not even searched, but just for the purposes of building up use. There is a video bank of that which we make available to the European Union.
The inspectors, of course, have come here to see the situation on the ground, both on the Gibraltar side and on the Spanish side. Was it your impression that they were already well acquainted with the situation, or were they very much starting with a blank page, so to speak?
No, I think that a lot of work has been done on this already by those who are visiting us, and a lot of work has been done, of course, by the Gibraltar administration and by others. The Deputy Chief Minister, as you know, has sent quite substantial dossiers going back some time. He started last year, so that they had the information available even before they came out to Gibraltar. So I think they're fully aware of what it is that we are complaining about, and fully aware also of what the arguments being put by Spain are. And they're here not to make a judgment based on argument. They're here to take data away. This is a field test, and they've come out to the field to see how things operate on the ground and to take away that data and make determinations based on objective data.
As everybody expected in Gibraltar, there weren't any queues this morning when the inspectors arrived. I asked their press officer about this, and he said that this was really irrelevant because they're here to see the mechanisms that are in place and how things are dealt with on the ground, as I said earlier. Is this also what they've said to you?
Well, I'm not going to disclose what it is that we've discussed, but put it this way, I would be very happy to see the inspectors buy a flat with a view of the queue, because if that is the permanent establishment that they need in order to keep Spain in check, so be it. The cameras are already there. The cameras are accessible from around the world. They're accessible remotely. As people know, the government of Gibraltar has other cameras which are not publicly available, but of course are going to be made available to the European Commission, which show what whether civil officers are doing or are not doing. And that information is going to be there for them on a day when there isn't queues as much as on a day when there are queues.
The European Commission said yesterday in a statement that there's no time limit by when they may issue anything publicly, or whether they will issue anything publicly at all. Is this a cause for concern?
Not at all. Look, I believe in the good faith of the institutions involved and the good faith of the people who are here to make the investigation. It may be that there is no need to do something publicly if the relevant governments are able to act based on recommendations of the Commission without these needing to be made public in any way that might embarrass one particular administration. We are not in Gibraltar looking to embarrass anyone. We're not looking to embarrass any particular administration. What we're looking for is a free-flowing frontier in the interests of workers and in the interests of those who have to come and go, whether they're going for leisure or for work purposes.
Well, the press officer was telling me that there are structural funds of the EU available to improve infrastructure and to improve situations at border crossings of the EU. Is that one possible way forward, that possibly the European Commission may offer some money in order to neutralize any Spanish argument that they haven't got the resources to put in place on their side?
It's a very hypothetical question, but the answer, of course, to it is yes. As you know, there are 6 lanes of traffic from Gibraltar going into Spain. There's 1 lane of motorcycles, there's 1 very large area for pedestrians, and there is only 1 red channel and 1 green channel in Spain for traffic. So therefore, if we could have more lanes in Spain dealing with the traffic, that might help. That may be an issue where European funding is relevant, but that's in the area of complete hypothesis at the moment.
If the Spanish frontier restrictions are relaxed and remain tolerable, it may well be a sign that the EU visit has had the desired effect.
Meanwhile, Spanish workers' organizations pitched demonstrations across the border, timed to coincide with the arrival of the European Commission inspectors. And Spanish unions Comisiones Obreras and UGT crossed over to meet with Unite and the Chief Minister with a view to improving cross-border dialogue and easing tensions between both populations.
Here on the other side of the border, it's not a day like any other. As you can see behind me, there's a hive of activity. There's loads of people milling around, a lot of police officers and camera crews from all over Spain. Queues, cars and vehicles are taking around an hour and a half to get into Gibraltar. So it's possible that the intention may be to give the impression that there are queues, there are border controls, but they're not as disproportionate as the media may have made out in the last few months. That's possibly the impression that they're trying to give. And Spanish pressure groups made the most of the occasion to argue their cause. ASTEG, the Spanish Association of Workers in Gibraltar, said that the Commission should be speaking to the people affected by the border queues, the workers who have had to endure hours of transit just to get to their daily jobs.
We are withstanding here with very difficulties, the long hours waiting in the queues, which are, to our way of understanding, are illegal and unnecessary. And in Spain, if there is a reason for fighting for any other thing, such as sovereignty or the waters or whatever, they should do it in the proper places. But never here on the frontier, where so many thousands of people suffer the consequences of the bad politics.
And the recently formed Union of La Linea civil servants, who haven't been paid in months, had no particular interest in the visit itself. It's just jumped onto the media bandwagon to raise the profile of their cause. Back in Gibraltar, the Chief Minister hosted a meeting for the Union Unite and its sister unions across the border, UGT and Comisiones Obreras. The meeting took place at the airport terminal. The unions believe that current cross-border tensions are bad for trade and bad for the people of both populations, and are looking to find common ground to re-establish dialogue.
I can tell you it's been very, very positive, and I think the manifesto we've presented both to the Junta and to the Minister, to Fabian Picardo today, is being supported by both sides. And obviously what we're asking is for dialogue, more dialogue and less radical action. The other day, for example, which is very, very concerning, is we had a radical group, La Falange, having a demonstration at the border, and that for us is totally unacceptable. We need to tackle the situation. We need to look for sensible solutions to the issue.
The unions have resolved to keep in touch and set up further meetings to advance their cause.
And we'll be back with more of this week's top stories after the break.
During the Second World War, no plan was so bold and daring as that conceived by the British in 1941, centred on the British colony of Gibraltar. Operation Tracer. The plan consisted of entombing 6 men inside a secret chamber in the heart of the Rock of Gibraltar for an indefinite period of time, with just one simple goal: to spy on the Germans and radio their findings to London every night without getting caught.
Welcome back. In his address to the United Nations in the early hours of Thursday morning, Spanish Premier Mariano Rajoy said Gibraltar is the only remaining colonial conflict in Europe, arguing that this continues to be problematic for Gibraltarians and those in the campo.
Addressing delegates in New York, Mariano Rajoy spent most of his speech advancing Spain's case for a seat on the UN Security Council. However, Mr. Rajoy of course also raised the question of Gibraltar, with the claim that it affects Spain's territorial integrity. He reiterated his call for the UK to enter into bilateral dialogue over the rock.
España reitera una vez más su llamamiento al Reino Unido para retomar el diálogo bilateral y la cooperación regional.
The Spanish Premier said the UK has ignored the mandate of the UN General Assembly and the commitments made to Spain in the 1984 Brussels Declaration.
El Reino Unido viene desoyendo el mandato de esta Asamblea General de Naciones Unidas y el compromiso contraído con España en la Declaración de Bruselas de 1984.
And although not mentioning this in his UN speech, in a further statement on the Moncloa website, Mr. Rajoy said there are 2 Gibraltar issues: the debate about sovereignty that has to mean dialogue between Spain and the UK, and, he said, the debate about Gibraltar itself, referring to the rock once again as a tax haven and a place with a smuggling problem. He said the UK and Spain have to meet to ensure that these issues are addressed.
The Ornithological and Natural History Society this week expressed concern at the prospect of the law changing to allow fishing with nets and raking, and has urged the government to resist allowing any commercial fishing. The GONHS says any such action could lead to a continuation of unregulated fishing, and enforcement would be difficult.
The GONHS says fishing with nets and seabed raking are extremely destructive to marine habitats and believes that a relaxation of fishing laws could lead to further deterioration. All of this, it says, whilst no fishing zones are enforced in protected areas in nearby Spain. The Society says licensed fishing and quotas would be difficult to enforce, and authorities would have to take on the additional burden of checking boats' licenses and land catches regularly in order to ensure that fishermen stick to their quotas. It says this seems quite onerous, especially given that Gibraltar itself doesn't have a commercial fishing industry. The GONHS says it urges the government to resist allowing any commercial fishing. It says it's vital that Gibraltar's marine resources are managed carefully to ensure proper protection and sustainable use of the rock's biodiversity. The group also wants government to continue creating new habitats, including an increase in artificial reefs. It believes the planned marine regulations controlling fishing and diving should be introduced without delay.
The Chief Minister thanked many of Gibraltar's supporters at the Labour Party conference, including party leader Ed Miliband, who met with Fabian Picardo. Mr. Picardo, who attended the conference together with Ministers Albert Isola and Samantha Sacramento, said Mr. Miliband was clear about Gibraltar's right to self-determination, as well as the reassurance that the UK would never discuss sovereignty unless it had the consent of the people of Gibraltar. The Chief Minister also met with Shadow Foreign Secretary Douglas Alexander, as well as Shadow Europe Minister Emma Reynolds, who may visit Gibraltar in the near future. The Gibraltar government hosted a reception at the conference which saw many members of the all-party group attend, as well as Union General Secretary Len McCluskey and Sarah Sackman, granddaughter of Solomon Seruya, and she has been selected to be the Labour candidate in the London constituency of Finchley, Baroness Thatcher's old seat. Now, the opposition this week declared an end to the summer ceasefire it self-imposed in order to enable the government to deal with the conflict with Spain. For the past 8 weeks, the GST says it's adopted a deliberate policy to say as little as possible on the current crisis to give the GSLP Liberals political space to resolve it. However, leader Daniel Feetham says the time has now come for the opposition to step up its scrutiny of domestic issues. Stephen Nish asked him why he felt this way, given that the crisis is still ongoing.
Well, in terms of us taking a step back and allowing the government the political space to deal with the current crisis, in particular, really to sit down with the Spanish government and the UK government to try and resolve the current crisis through dialogue, we took a conscious decision to provide that space, not to make too many public statements in relation to those issues, despite the fact that when I have made public statements, I have emphasized that there is a philosophical difference, a difference in approach in relation to our relations with Spain. As far as domestic issues are concerned, well, the government asked me to explore with me the possibility of not asking questions in September, because the government at the present moment is trying to prepare for talks with Spain. And of course, question and answer sessions take a long time administratively on the part of the government. Anybody that's been a government minister will be able to do that. And I agreed in the national interest to forego questions in September in order again to give the government that space.
But the point is that the crisis hasn't ended yet, so why doesn't the philosophy that you've adopted for the past 8 weeks of lying low and not giving the government too much flack continue?
Because look, what you can't do is continue with a moratorium of political activity or relative political activity ad infinitum. It's not possible. And
isn't it unusual that this truce is ended just after the summer? Maybe it was quite convenient for the opposition to be inactive for the last 8 weeks when it was summer, and it was convenient to say that this was in the national interest.
That is a complete and utter nonsensical point for you to make with respect.
Why?
Because the reality is that we have had a crisis. We have provided the government the space for the last 8 weeks.
But we still have the crisis.
Hang on a minute, please. But we cannot continue ad infinitum in relation to the opposition not doing its job in terms of scrutinizing what are important public issues. I mean, remember that right up to July, there was an intense political battle here in Gibraltar in relation to the Sunborn and the Gibraltar Savings Bank. Those issues are still live issues. Now, the fact that we
so is the crisis.
But the fact that we have allowed the government that political space, and we are going to continue to allow the government to a certain extent political space in relation to examining their own responsibility for the current crisis, and I've said that on a number of occasions, and I flagged up that I believe that the opportune time for that is going to be the debate in Parliament on the amendments to the Nature Protection Act. Despite that, we've got to continue with our job as an opposition. We cannot just simply ad infinitum suspend our scrutiny on domestic issues.
Some people might say that you should have continued doing that job for the past 8 weeks.
Some people may. My judgment was that we needed to provide the government with that political space. We've had some really intense, or Gibraltar has come under very, very intense pressure. Whether it's the responsibility of the government or not, that is the reality. And I took the decision, together with my cabinet colleagues, that we will provide the government with that political space. It cannot continue ad infinitum. And now the time has come for us to concentrate on what are very important domestic issues. Gibraltar Savings Bank, for example, the Sunborn, where we suspended political hostilities in July. The time has now come for us to now refocus on that. I think that nobody in Gibraltar can deny that we have tried our best in the national interest to provide the government with sufficient space to deal with the crisis, some would say of their own making. But we've tried to do that, including not asking questions for September.
Would you expect Mr. Feetham, that given that you, if you like, are ending the period of grace that there was over the last 8 weeks, would you expect that the weekly briefings that you've been receiving from the Chief Minister on the crisis with Spain to continue?
Well, that's up to him, and that's a question that you've got to ask him, not me.
The Cancer Relief Centre saw its official launch this week. The centre has been receiving patients since April, but was now officially opened by the Chief Minister. As well as the Governor, Sir Adrian Johns, other dignitaries at the event included the Leader of the Opposition and members of Parliament from both sides.
Cancer Relief Gibraltar has come a long way since it all began in 1983, when the committee was first put together and the Lady Williams Centre for Day and Respite Care was opened. 25 years later, and the Chief Minister has officially launched the long-awaited new premises on South Barracks Road.
Declare the Cancer Relief Centre officially open. Yeah. It's very difficult to hear the word cancer. Now, for any family that's gone through that, it's a word that touches every sinew in your body. And to have the word relief after the word cancer, I think, means a lot to everybody who has experienced the care provided by the Lady Williams Centre all the way back 25 years ago, a quarter of a century when you started, and to know that the service is there now in this fabulous permanent building, I think means a hell of a lot to many families in Gibraltar.
With cancer being the highest cause of death in Gibraltar, the centre is very much in demand. The new, fully refurbished centre offers support from the time of diagnosis onwards, supporting not only patients, but family members too.
It's been a long haul. Yeah, there's been a lot of people involved in this. But for me, although this is a celebration, the important thing is the care that we give to patients and their families. And already I receive feedback from patients who unfortunately have got cancer, who have been helped by the services that we offer here. The services are funded by this community. So therefore, it's a celebration of everyone, of the kindness of the community in supporting this charity and enabling us to provide this support to people who've got cancer and their families.
It definitely is more a home away from home. We've got a fabulous patio that is so relaxing, gets people the opportunity to sit outside in a really calm environment. And then we've got some amazing services that we can provide here now that we couldn't do in the previous premises. So we've got new services like the Head Smart and the beauticians, which was something that was new that we've been done here. And also we're running nurse clinics now as well, which is something that we couldn't do in the old premises. So it just gives us more opportunity to expand what we can do for the community, for those people that are affected with cancer and for their families, and hopefully also for the future in regards to the hospice.
Among the invited guests was Lady Williams herself, who was instrumental in setting up the charity in the early 80s.
I'm very lucky to be asked, and thanks to the Governor, I was able to come and stay at the convent, and Marisa and I have been in correspondence for some time now, and so it was really very kind of them to invite me to come. I'm delighted.
You can contact the centre on 200 42392. Between Monday and Friday, the doors are open, offering a homely environment, aromatherapy, counselling, or even just a chat and a cup of coffee.
And also this week, former director of the Gibraltar Music Centre and Galpe singers Hector Cortés died at the age of 68. Francisco Oda, director of the Cervantes Institute, said it was business as usual at the centre following news that the right-wing Spanish union Manos Limpias had asked the Spanish foreign minister to close down the local operation. And Greg Smith was appointed the new RAF station commander. For the rest of this week's news, you can head over to our website, gbc.gi/news. Tune into Radio Gibraltar and GBC Television throughout the week for the very latest local news. You can also follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. Thank you very much for watching this evening. Good night.